Imagine this. The Civil War has ended, the North has triumphed over the South, and for the first time in your life, you are no longer considered someone's property. No more chains, no more forced labor, no more being treated as less than human. You step outside, breathe in the air of what is supposed to be freedom. Word spreads like wildfire. General William T. Sherman has met with black leaders and a promise has been made. Every free black family will receive 40 acres of land and, in some cases, a mule to work it. Finally, a real opportunity to build something for yourself, your children, and for generations to come. But that promise, honey, it was never kept. Meanwhile, just a few years earlier, the U.S. government had already set the stage for white families to acquire land, wealth, and opportunity through the Homestead Act of 1862. So let's talk about it. The lie of 40 acres and a mule versus the reality of the Homestead Act. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are doing well. First, I just want to say thank you for being here. And I know I've been gone for a minute, but with the looming threat of a TikTok ban, y'all know the one that happened a few weeks ago, and even though they restored, the ban and restore TikTok, we still are on borrowed time. Yeah, that one. I decided it's time to take this platform serious. So for 2025, we're going all in. Not only will we be diving deep into African American history that they don't teach you in school, but we're also going to expose the whitewashed versions of our history and correct the misinformation. And of course, we're still keeping it spiritual, hoodoo and all. This new series was inspired by the Project 2025 write-up and the growing attempts to erase Black history in America. And also, the Kendrick Lamar reference. I'll put it right here. Yeah, that one. We need to get back to relearning our history the correct way. They want to shut down the Department of Education and rewrite history books, but we're not letting that happen, at least not while I'm around. This series will focus on the stories, figures, and events that they try to bury. So let's start with one of the biggest broken promises in American history, 40 acres and a mule. We all heard the phrase, former slaves were promised 40 acres and a mule. But let's break it down and separate the facts from the fiction. This promise came from Special Field Order Number 15, issued by General William T. Sherman on January 16, 1865. The order allocated 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land along the southeast coast, stretching through South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida for freed Black families. Each family was to receive up to 40 acres of tillable land, and in some cases, a mule. But here's where the myth starts. The order never actually promised mules. The government only gave out leftover army mules to some families, but that wasn't part of the official policy, y'all. So where did this idea even come from? It wasn't just Sherman's idea. 4 days before he issued the order, he and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton met with 20 Black community leaders in Savannah, Georgia. They asked them directly, what do you need to successfully integrate into society? Which I think their answer was land, y'all. They needed land. They understood that land ownership meant true freedom, not just legally, but economically. Sherman listened and put the order into motion. General Rufus Saxton was appointed to divide the land and settle free families on it. Had this policy been fully executed, honey, it would have been the first real form of reparations in America. It would have set the foundations for generational wealth for millions of newly freed Black Americans. But then, tragedy struck. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Now, his successor, President Andrew Johnson, had no interest in Black progress. Instead of honoring the order, he reversed it, y'all, returning the land to its former Confederate owners. So what happened to the freedmen who had started new lives on that land? Most were left with nothing, forced into sharecropping. Sharecropping, the one that they try to make it seem like our ancestors love to do, which some of them do, don't get me wrong, but they try to justify slavery with saying that the slaves enjoyed sharecropping. Yeah, that one. Often working for the same people who had once enslaved them. Reconstruction for Black Americans became a struggle for survival. But for white Americans, it was a different story. While Black Americans were being robbed of their promised land, white Americans were handed land for free through the Homestead Act of 1862. Signed by Abraham Lincoln, this law allowed any U.S. citizen or intended citizen to claim up to 160 acres of federal land in the West. The only requirement? Live on it for 5 years and improve it, meaning cultivate the land, build a home, and make it profitable. This act fundamentally shaped America and gave thousands of white families the opportunity to build wealth, land ownership, and legacy. This is actually how a lot of white America established generational wealth that they still are benefiting from today. Between 1862 and 1934, over 1.6 million homesteads were granted, distributing 270 million acres of land. Now, yes, Black people were eligible to apply. And yes, some Black families are able to acquire land through homesteading, particularly in states like Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. But let's be for real. Access was never equal. Black homesteaders faced discrimination, violence, and systematic barriers. Meanwhile, white settlers built towns, farms, and generational wealth on land they got for practically nothing. The Homestead Act was never overturned, but 40 acres and a mule, honey, that was snatched away before it could even begin. The government had no problem giving millions of acres to white Americans, but when it came to Black people, suddenly land ownership was too much. Instead, we got Black codes, Jim Crow, redlining, generations of policies designed to keep us from owning land, building wealth, and passing down generational prosperity. And yet we still fought. We built Black Wall Streets. We homestead in hostile territories. We created wealth despite the obstacles. But let's be honest, 40 acres and a mule was never, ever enough. The debt America owes to Black people for generations of stolen labor, stolen lives, and stolen opportunities, honey, that bill is still unpaid. Until next time.